There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. And today, I'm in a location that I've only filmed in once before. One bookshelf behind me in the hallway, next to the bathroom. I did just remember to get up and close that door. You've seen enough of my bathroom in recent videos. But I'm a little bit short on recording space at the moment because my apartment is all pulled apart because we had yet another cockroach infestation. Not in my apartment, not in my suite, but somewhere in the building. So they treated all of the apartments and it was such an ordeal. It always is. Plus, the building management here are so effing incompetent that it made it 10 times more inconvenient, and I won't bother going into the details of that because I'm sure they're all watching this video. And I can't put things back in place until they've done a check, maybe even 2 checks. And so I'm living out of, all my dishes are in boxes or on the washing machine in the dryer. My one bookshelf is pulled out, which you'll see in the mystery guest video. So I didn't want to film the whole video there. So here I am. I finally watched that British movie. The 2 leads are Irish, I'm pretty sure. God, I'm pretty stupid about when I talk about anything other than books, and don't even always have all my wits about me when I talk about books, but I think it's called All of Us Strangers, or Among All of Us Strangers, and it stars Andrew Scott and Paul Mescaline. No, not Mescaline, but Mescal. It's one of the best movies I've seen in a long time, which maybe isn't saying much because I don't watch movies, but this one was exquisite. I loved it, and I found out, in anticipation of watching it, I went over to my dear friend Gwen's house and watched it on her big screen TV. I found out it's based on a Japanese novel that I owned when I was in Tokyo before I even got really into reading. I picked it up for $2, read the first chapter, loved it, and never went back to it because I was still in that 20-year reading slump and didn't keep it. I don't remember when I got rid of it, but I don't have it anymore. And now to buy that Japanese novel, I don't remember the title or author, so the GIF is on the screen here. You can't. It's out of print. You can't find a copy. Maybe you can on archive.org. I don't remember if I checked, but I'm sure right at this very moment, Joe Smith is checking for me. A used copy is like $100 or something. So anyway, the movie was stunning. It was the kind of story that would have been woo-woo if it hadn't been so wonderfully acted. The actors really carried the story. It was just amazing. I'm going through a lot of changes at the moment. So one of them is I whittled my current reads down from 52 down to 14. That video is quite a lot of you have seen that already. After boycotting Scribd for 4 years, I, on a whim, resubscribed because an audiobook that I wanted was on there, and I could have bought it for the same price as a 1-month membership to Scribd, so I decided it's now called Everand. And I'm enjoying it. I'm just not going to be a high volume user, and maybe I won't run into the problems I did when I was a high volume user, because then they kept shutting me out of books that I was reading and had buddy reading deadlines and couldn't get into the ebook or the audiobook until for 3 weeks or something, and that drove me nuts. That's why I quit in a huff, but I'm back. We'll see how it goes. But I'm slowly getting into movies, but in a weird sort of, typically eccentric Sean the Book Maniac way. When I watch YouTube now, I love nothing better than to watch publicity interviews with actors about movies. It started with Timothy Chalamet, and then it just moved on to Tom Holland and these guys, Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott. And I just love all of that so much, but rarely does it make me want to see the movie. Like Tom Holland, I adore him, and him and Zendaya when they're together, oh, it's so adorable. I have no interest in seeing any movie he's ever been in. If he stars in a good movie, I might watch it, but, he stars Spider-Man shit. So, but he's absolutely adorable. So that, I'm kind of getting into movies indirectly. But this one, whatever it was called, the gay Irish movie, was just to die for. All right. Without further ado, let's go to this week's very exciting mystery guest. And today's mystery guest is the Trinidadian British writer Ingrid Persaud, joining us from the UK today. Hello, Ingrid.
Hi, Sean. Lovely to be back on your show. I think it's been 4 years.
It has. I interviewed Ingrid way back in the day, 2020, about her, I believe it's your debut novel. Certainly, it's the first novel that you wrote that I'd ever heard of, Love After Love, which was one of my top reads that year. And I had a long form chat with Ingrid that I'll link in the show notes. And here we are 4 years later, because she has another novel coming out, and this one's a doorstopper. It's called The Lost Love Songs of Boise Sing, and it's coming out in maybe 2 weeks, I think, in the
Yeah,
UK.
just under 2 weeks, so it's a really exciting time.
Now, it sounds like I didn't go back and look, but I think I asked you what you were working on back then, and this one does sound like what you kind of described. So tell us about The Lost Love Songs of Boise Sing.
Well, first, I got my author's copies
Ooh.
yesterday.
Yeah, you're gonna have to
There,
put it right in front of your. There we go. Yeah, it's a beautiful cover.
it really is. They've done me proud. I was working on a different novel, but Boise Singh kept coming back to me in different forms and I couldn't ignore him. So eventually, and a zillion drafts later, I've finally told the story that I didn't know I wanted to tell. And I say that because Boise Singh, if you look him up, you'll find that he was a real life gangster who lived in the 20s to 50s of Trinidad. And he was a gambling king, a pimp, a pirate, a thief. He was just an all out sort of petty criminal as well. He had a stint as a preacher. And he made legal history in Trinidad because he was eventually executed for the murder of a woman whose body was never found. His story is so fascinating that one person could cram so much into one life that I started with him. But what became obvious as I delved into the research was that there were women in his life who were very important, but they had been not so much airbrushed out of history as never considered by history. So you can't airbrush out what you've never actually acknowledged. So I started with his wife, Doris, and every time I touched the material would touch me. So I'm doing research about Doris, and I can't find anyone who knew her or who was willing to talk to me about her until one day at a restaurant. I meet some family friends, and the mother is visiting from Trinidad, and she asks me what I'm doing, and I say I'm, doing some research for a book on Boise Singh, and I'm currently looking at his wife, Doris. And she says, "You don't mean Tanti Doris?" And it turns out, as a child, she lived next door to Doris's sister. And her mom had 9 kids, and Doris's sister had 9 kids. So they took down the fence between the properties so that these children could have essentially, their own football team almost. And there were more incidents like that. And gradually I got a real sense that these women had stories that they were desperate to tell. Or maybe that was just I was desperate to tell. And that's how we end up with the book.
And so the novel focuses on 4 of them. So you've told us a bit about Doris. Give us a quick intro to the other 3 lives that you chronicle.
Sure. So Manalala is the baby mother. So she's known him since her childhood. She was the mother of his only child, Junsi, and she was also the only one of those women who was present at his execution. So she sort of lost the whole chronology. She's a tough character. She was the most difficult to write because there's a lot of resignation and despair in her personality and what she endures, but also a lot of hope that just simmers through. And that was very difficult to reconcile. The other two were Popo, and Popo was a sex worker that he met and lived with for about 6 years. She's alleged to have given him the money that helped him start his first gambling establishment. And he tried to kill her by grinding glass and embedding it in a roti, which he then force-fed her. So, charming man. And the last one, Rosie, was really just a passing comment about a girl from an orphanage that he might have had some sort of relationship with. And going into the history of the orphanage led me to flesh out the character of Rosie. And I really had nothing else to go on. I had so few clues to go on with all of the women, so it's fiction.
Yes, and you are a novelist. So my next question was going to be, why didn't you write a biography or a work of nonfiction? Obviously, you are a novelist, and obviously, from what you've just said, there wasn't a whole lot of documentation about these women. But
No.
I'd like to invite you to riff a little more on transforming true history or true biography into fiction and what that process was like, because this was a very different project than Love After Love.
It's a very different project. And unlike quite a lot of historical fiction, I didn't have a wealth of primary resources. So the paper documents were how things were stored. And there was a great fire at a place called the Red House, which was our depository for official papers of the courts, etc. So I had to turn to sources like oral history, songs that were, created at the time, newspaper articles, and one book which is largely based on interviews with Boise Singh's son, his only child. I was just constantly looking for what were the alternative places that would hide the information.
And Love After Love was a story that I think you pulled out of your wonderful imagination, and you weren't basing it on, maybe there was some factual basis for some of it, but how different was this writing project in terms of fictionalizing based on what paucity of research you could pull out of the archives?
It's only my second novel, so I was learning on the job, and it took a long time and many drafts to give myself permission to write fiction, because I thought, you must be true to the facts. Well, I wasn't writing nonfiction, but I was constrained by the thought that there was a history that I was missing out on documenting, and also that there are people alive who are descended from the players in this. And even if I never meet them or they never read this book, I felt a responsibility to them in some way. So it was balancing that sense of responsibility to the fiction writer. And it took a long time to give myself permission to write a story, and to write a story of its time as well.
And you have done it again. You have another title that has the word love in it. And I'm just going to hazard a guess that the love in this novel is quite different, or plays out quite differently than it did in Love After Love, where basically there was tragedy in the book, but the main characters were all kind of, you were rooting for them, whereas this is centered around a kind of a bad guy. So another way in which it was a very different writing experience for you, I'm sure.
It's so interesting, but I feel that the Boise that comes through at the end is not necessarily someone who you dismiss as simply an evil
Interesting.
person. There were 4 women in his life. These 4 women, as I've created the story, are attempting to exert control over him, and he's attempting to exert control over them. And there's a power dynamic. And, it's not clear at times who's controlling who. I think it's more nuanced. But in terms of what love can mean, I think the first novel was exploring different types of love and questioning hierarchies of love. Also, since it borrowed from Derek Walcott, it was about, in his poem Love After Love, about loving oneself. I think love in this context here looks at a narrower definition. There is familiar love, there is erotic love, but the love songs are the life kind of beat of someone rather than a particular study of love. And I managed to get Derek Walcott into the book as well. So the very last page, I have some poetry of Derek Walcott. So I've kept a few things that are similar in both books.
Oh, it sounds really intriguing, and I'm hoping to read it later this year and have you back on for a longer chat about it. So that would be great. It's maybe too soon to ask you this question, but maybe not. Is there anything you're working on now?
I'm definitely sketching. I have an idea and I'm working really in small scenes and trying to solve some problems of plot and character early on. So it's really early days. But I think if I wasn't writing, the marketing and touring would be too difficult. I wouldn't have something to sustain me.
Well, I'm excited to see what comes of that. But in the meantime, you've put out a tome that's going to keep me busy for a while. So that's awesome. I have been waiting. So I'm very happy. I was absolutely delighted when I found out that your novel was coming out. Have you been reading anything interesting recently, Ingrid?
Well, I have. I read all the time, of course. So I'll just tell you, I couldn't choose. So I've opted for the very last book I finished. The book I want to talk about is this one, Kevin Barry's new novel. And it took him 25 years to find this novel in its completion. And it's called The Heart in Winter. It's coming out in June. So it's coming out a little bit later than mine. I love Kevin Barry's work, so I'm a bit of a fangirl. And his last novel, The Night Boat to Tangier, I remember, actually, that's not his last, it's the second to last. I remember how much that transported me. Every night, I'd limit how much I read because I didn't want it to end. And similarly, with this book, The Heart in Winter, it's a short book. It's just over 200 pages. So it can be read in a day and in one sitting, but you don't want to do that. You want to savor it. It's the story of sort of the Wild West. It's the Irish in America kind of finding their fortune, and it's an unreal world of wilderness and lawlessness, where this woman who has she's essentially a mail order bride. This guy writes off and she agrees to marry him, and she turns up and she falls in love with someone else, and they go off together, and there are people who've come in search of them, so they're journeying, and behind them always are other people in search of them who want to bring her back and want to kill him. And from that simple premise, he has the most incredible meditations on time, addiction, and love and care. And what does it mean to be alive? What are the essential ingredients of being alive? Not necessarily being happy, but to be alive. Oh, it was such a wonderful read. I finished it and I want to start it all over again because it's that kind of book.
I haven't read anything he's written, and I see he's written a whole pile. There's a whole bunch of
A whole pile, and he's won, most of the major awards going. So no, he's a big deal.
I see it's set in Montana, which is just immediately south of Saskatchewan, where I live now. Ingrid, it's always wonderful to chat with you. Thanks for being my mystery guest, and I hope you'll come back on and have a longer chat with me later on. Good luck with the book launch.
Thank you so much, Sean, and I can't wait to come back.
So I was so excited when I found out Ingrid had a new novel coming out, and I think that was obvious in that chat. Can't wait for it to come out. I've already pre-ordered it. I just took all my equipment apart and realized there was one thing I totally forgot to tell you, which was just to set up the intro for a very quick chat about an upcoming literary event in Saskatoon at the end of April that is so interesting that I think you should fly in for it if you're not already in Saskatoon. Do I have any, other than my close friends, do I have any Saskatoon viewers? I've never met one or heard about one. Anyway, here it is. This is a special little chat with a special person who's been on my channel before. This is the novelist Meredith Hambrock, author of Other People's Secrets. She was a mystery guest on my channel a few weeks back, and I had coffee with Meredith a few days ago and found out that she is putting together a fabulous event. It's such an interesting event that I think people who don't even live in Saskatoon should travel to Saskatoon to attend this event because, oh my God, it sounds so fascinating. Meredith, take it away. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks so much for having me back to chat about this. I'm so excited about this collaboration that I've been working on between the Saskatoon Public Library, where I'm the current writer in residence, and the Ramey Modern Art Museum. And they have a really wonderful exhibit going on right now. It's a bunch of works from their permanent collection. It's called Views from the Blue House. Part of their sort of description of this exhibit is that they wanted people in Saskatoon to come and kind of find their own stories in the art that's on the walls, which I think is a really cool sort of curatorial thing. And yeah, so they reached out to me and they wanted to invite a collaboration with some local writers. And they had a few ideas. And one of them was to kind of commission some short literary works by local writers that are based on pieces from the exhibit. So I had the awesome responsibility of getting a group together, and I've got some great local writers for everybody to come. And I just got a preview of the pieces last weekend, and we're going to see some really, really amazing stuff. So I'll be doing 2 pieces, and I don't want to say too much about it, but I'm really, really excited about them. One of them is very dialogue heavy. And then we've got a great young writer named Aziamu who's coming and working on some kind of fiction, nonfiction hybrid that is really, really exciting. We've got a local poet, Josiah Nelson, who has an MFA from USask and I think also teaches there in the program, and he's working on something really interesting. We've got local fiction writer Kate O'Gorman, who is bringing a really, really unique kind of short fiction piece. And we have another wonderful poet, Jamie Speed, who is working on something really special. They're all really special. I am so excited about these writers. I think they're all really, really talented. So we're going to be doing an event on Thursday, April 25th in the theater at the Ramey. Entrance is by donation, as it always is at the Ramey. And yeah, it's just going to be about an hour long. And then the writers will be around after in the gallery to chat about kind of the sort of style of writing and what inspired them about the specific pieces that they chose. So it's going to be a fun kind of springtime celebration, which I'm just really looking forward to.
This sounds so good. It sounds so good to me that I have kind of rescheduled a whole bunch of things I had going on that day just so I can attend. There was one thing later in the day I couldn't reschedule, so I have to rush home right at 8 o'clock, but I'll be there for the full hour. And so it's basically a literary reading, but all of the readings are based on a work of art that's in the museum in that particular exhibit, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not going to spoil what the pieces are.
No.
It's going to
No.
But we will have the works of art projected behind.
Projected, okay.
Yeah, they're going to
Yes.
be projected, and then afterwards in the gallery, everyone who attends the event is so welcome to come and hang out with us. We can talk about the process and inspiration behind what we chose and sort of what the connections are. And some of the connections that the writers have made are really direct to the piece, and some are like a little more indirect. And it's sort of interesting just to see what everybody's process is when they're looking at art and finding themselves in other people's work.
Meredith and I had coffee last week, I think it was, a few days ago. We had quite the conversation about ekphrastic literature, phrases, and this sounds like a fabulously ekphrastic evening. So, my goodness, thank you for putting it all together for us.
Yeah, you know what? It's been like the kind of big project that I've been working on as part of my residency at the Saskatoon Public Library. So it's just been really, really cool to get to kind of like bring these two institutions together a little bit.
Meredith, thanks for telling us about it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, I have been busy on BookTube this week, and let's see if I can remember all the things that I've done. There was another episode of Zooming In with James Morrison about having an overflowing library, which was just wonderful. And that was, yeah, I love that. And then my video about my reckoning with my burgeoning current reads problem, which really helped me get focused. And then a wee book haul. I was hoping to get the Sharon Butala video ready last night, but I just ran out of steam and ran out of time. So that'll be probably the next video that comes up, and it's a doozy. All right, and this week I finished one book. So, so far my new, improved, reduced, retrenched current reads hasn't dramatically transformed, what I have to report to you. But, give me some time. And the one book that I finished before I made that video. So I still have 14 books on my current reads. And that was Edith Wharton's Summer, a novella published, I think, in around 1917. And I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. I had a great seminar, Zoom seminar with some wonderful readers, all of whom absolutely worshipped it. I didn't worship it, but I enjoyed it, and there was lots of good stuff to talk about. And there was quite a pile-on about my criticism, so it's kind of an entertaining video, which will, in the next few weeks it'll come onto my channel. The interlocutors were Dorian Stuber, James Morrison, and Chris Wolak of the Book Cookers. First time us four had been together. Chris was a new addition to the group, but it was a really invigorating chat. I'm not going to say any more than that here. Stay tuned for that video. I have one book. Is it only one book? Yes, I think so. I think I'm organized, but I'm a little fuzzy-headed because I've been awake since 5 o'clock and I couldn't get back to sleep. So I'm filming this at around 7 a.m. And because of where I'm filming it, all of my equipment, which is I have 4 tripods in front of me. 2 lighting things and my mic and the iPad that is recording it, and I am wedged in. So there's just one book I realize I've forgotten, and I can't. It would just kill me to try and move stuff, and everything would get all out of whack. There might have been one other book that I started that I was ready to check in on, but I can't remember now. The one that I'm dying to check in on, and I was actually hoping to finish it, but it is resisting a fast read, which is not my MO anyway. This novella, it's autofiction, The Hearing Test by Eliza Barry Callahan, that I got from the library. And this is just knocking my socks off. I'm sure it's going to be in my top 5 of the year. And it's really hard to talk about. It's based on her true life, so I think it's autofiction. I don't know how much is fictionalized, and I don't care. It is just mesmerizing. About the age of, she's in her late 20s, when she experiences some rare condition that causes sudden hearing loss, and so she's going deaf. And for whatever reason, I've just kind of fallen into developing an interest in deaf literature and the deaf experience, which is why I was drawn to it. But it is using that experience in a way that is so mesmerizingly expansive in an essayistic way, and incorporating all the stories she's hearing, and I'm using that word hearing kind of in quotes because it's all about what can you hear, how much do you hear, regardless of how good your hearing is or bad your hearing is, how well do you listen, and what does silence mean? And it's meditative in a way that is incredibly invigorating. So she's taking me places and having me look up artists that she's writing about, artists that were deaf I didn't know Who was the artist I was just reading about last night? I didn't know anything about him because I don't know much about art. Goya. I didn't know anything about Goya, but he went deaf. And he moved into a house that was owned by a deaf man. And because of that first man who lived there, it's called House of the Deaf Man, Quinta del Sordo. And he painted a bunch of famous paintings. I think in the English they're called the Black Paintings. The Spanish title of the series that were painted on the wall, Pintores Negras. And she's getting online hypnotherapy to help her with whatever aspects of her hearing loss. And the screen freezes up, and she incorporates what it's like when the voice crackles in a Zoom freeze up into her meditations on losing her hearing. And then the hypnotherapist is in South America somewhere, and his wife has to come to the computer. She's an artist, and she has to get it all sorted out. And then she starts discoursing on this series by Goya, and it's the whole book is like that. And then you go into Goya, and then there was stuff about Woodstock. And the other thing that I just absolutely love about it is in places it is hilarious. So there's a lot of humor in it, which melds with this meditative, probing, meandering curiosity. You just fall into it, and it resists. Like, this is a book I know I'm going to reread. Certainly if I'm going to do a standalone review, I have to reread it. I'm going to order the paperback copy from the UK because I like that cover so much more than this one. But this, well, maybe the last thing I'll say about it is, I don't think that's how I found out about it, but it may have been. But Amina Kane loves this book. She's blurbed it. And so I will now forevermore trust blurbs I encounter from Amina Kane. So let's see what she says about it, because that's the best I can do. Not for a while have I read a book by a writer new to me and felt so much toward it so fast. Oh, that's exactly what it's like for me. The hearing test takes up fragility, sound, and silence, solitude, the unknown, and the self in relation to others, with a light yet serious touch. I've found a new favorite. Well, that's exactly how I feel. Yeah, more later, but this is just stunning. So, because I only finished one book, and that doesn't count toward I'm still at reading 14, and my ceiling is 15, I have 2 buddy reads starting this week. And because I'm so committed to kind of getting my reading life under control, I've actually postponed one of them just a few days to give me a chance to finish another book so that I don't go over 15. So how's that for determination? The one that I postponed, the first check-in was supposed to be this coming Thursday, and it's actually going to be a week from tomorrow on Saturday. This is the next in Sonia of an Enthusiastic Readers and my chronological buddy reading of complete works of Edna O'Brien. So we're now up to 1977, and this is her novel that the British title is Johnny, I Hardly Knew You, and then it had a different title in America. So here's the book cover, because I've just got a barefaced library book. Here's the British cover. It's a novella, so we're going to read it in a couple of weeks. Looking forward to it. Don't know what it's about, but it's Edna O'Brien, so it has a 90% chance of being something that I'm going to love. And the book that's out there that I don't want to upset the apple cart here and go get it, is a very famous new release. It's the new Tommy Orange. I don't remember the title, but I'm really excited to dive in. My check-in on the first 50 or 75 pages of that in my buddy read with Heidi of My Reading Life is on Monday, so that'll be mainly what I'll be reading on the weekend, and I'm so excited about that. That's what I got this week. Thanks for watching.